you need to set the politics aside, and you need to set aside at the moment that they're on the brink of a recession. There has been some really tough times through the US at the moment. Interest rates are extremely low, but there's not a lot of spending going on. So if we set that aside for the moment and we try and cover what's happening in the space of retail and in the space of mixed use, I'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Please do.
So as I said, traveling right across the US, east to west coast, every city's different, but there's a constant. And the constant in the US, and I'll talk specifically about retail and placemaking, and then I'll get into a bit of detail. There has been too much retail on the ground, too much retail square foot. With poor planning over many, many decades, retail just evolved, and it opened up on every street corner, and there are huge boxes everywhere. And over time, there has been a simple oversupply of retail. So what we're finding at the moment is that there's an average occupancy of somewhere between 90 and 92% across US malls.
Wow.
Which is low. Which tells you that in the next 10 years, a third of the malls will close.
So 92% is 90%, low.
Absolutely. Very low occupancy levels in the US malls. Even their best malls today, without quoting the names of them, but I do know these facts, sit with 30 and 40 vacancies. And the reason being is that there have been big changes to the retail landscape. Particularly structurally, and how people shop and how demographics view shopping today, and the different ways people are doing things. But if we go back to step and think about what does that hold for the future, a lot of the spaces in the shopping centres are changing. We're seeing the emergence of new uses, particularly big entertainment uses, and up to 30% of some of the US malls now have got restaurants, markets, more food and beverage, and are really driving through this experience growth at the expense of apparel. And apparel is slipping out of the malls. And that's the online disruption that's come through there, but also coupled, and importantly, Jason, people say online has caused the demise of bricks and mortar. I say it's been one of the factors. Much more influential has been the way people shop today compared to how they shopped 10 years ago. People today, and particularly the millennials, they do not value buying lots of material things like clothing and new footwear and having to update that all the time. They would far rather buy an experience. And to do that, they will come to the mall and they'll only buy something if it really changes or adds value to their lives. So if you make a difference in a millennial's life, he will spend money on material things, but they will quickly go and buy a great burger, or sit and listen to some jazz, or watch a movie, do some live entertainment. That's where the focus is for them.
Isn't this the case though in shopping centres in Asia where I grew up? The shopping centre is a place of activity, it's a place of entertainment because there isn't a lot of space around in many of the large Asian cities. Isn't this simply following the trend that we've already seen in some of the Asian cities?
I think in a way it's turning full circle. If you go back to 1954, Gruen was the mastermind behind the first shopping centre, and he developed it with the thought of a village. He knew Europe, he came from Austria, and believed that he needed to create somewhere where people would flock to. But it kind of changed over the next decade. So from being this village, it suddenly became the high street internalised. And then that model continued for many, many, many years. But too much of it was built. And so what we're getting back to now is a true village, where people go to every single day, not just to shop. They go to see their friends, have a coffee. A lot of medical services are appearing in the malls throughout the US. You can drop your child off at the daycare. You can go and get your nails done. You can go and see your doctor. You can get a massage. You can get your hair done.
Things that you would traditionally do on the high street.
Correct. It's all now forcing its way into the mall. And over time, what we'll see is it'll be a place where it'll be like the village of old. You won't need to go anywhere else but to the mall, and it'll have a whole lot of new experiences within it.
So what does that mean then for the high streets? In Western cities, the high street was the centre of a village or the city. Certainly you look around Australian suburbs or British suburbs, the high street was an important place. And the last few decades, the shopping centres have sucked away the life of the high street. What is the future of the high street in that particular model?
It's actually gone both ways. What you had strong high streets, then you got strong malls. And in the late 90s, early 2000, the reverse started happening. Malls started to become a little bit weaker. They started to lose their trade. And the high streets got a bit stronger. But the malls had to come back. So what they did was they pulled all the entertainment off the high streets, all the cinemas, all the restaurants, all the cafes, all the typical high street activation came from the high street into the shopping centres. And so today, unfortunately, throughout Europe, we are seeing vacancy on the high street. And they're struggling on the high street to pull the brands and to pull the coffee shops and to pull the people, because it's much easier to get to a shopping centre and have a variety of choices and be able to park easily. So a private ownership of the high street has been very hard, it's been a big challenge for those owners of the high street to take on the big shopping centres.
But what is the purpose then of the high street?
The high street does need to revisit its model. I think it has to be a much lower rental model. I think it needs to be a part of the ecosystem, but it's where the startups occur on the high streets. So a lot more of the new startup retail needs to go there, a lot more pop-up retail. It needs to focus on services as well. So things you don't have to go to the shopping centre for should still be available on the high street. And that's a way for the high streets to come back. But they're up against an enormous challenge.